Usually when we talk about romantic love in popular culture, there is this expectation of, well, total mystique.
Oh, absolutely, like magic.
Right. Like you meet someone, the stars align, the violins swell, and the
Yeah.
songwriter just points at the sky and says, it's destiny.
Yeah, it's clean, it's poetic,
Yeah.
and it's entirely unexplainable.
Yeah, that's nice. Right.
It is deeply comforting. I mean, we love to be this elevated, almost supernatural force that completely defies logic or categorization or any sort of earthly mechanics.
But then you step into the world of Cole Porter,
Oh,
and
yes.
suddenly that mystical violin is snatched right out of the musician's hands.
Kate?
Because with Porter, we are looking at a romantic landscape that is, honestly, it's mechanical.
Highly mechanical.
It's structural. It's almost aggressively architectural, if that makes sense.
It makes perfect sense. It is the absolute definition of viewing romance through a cynical, highly analytical lens. I mean, Porter doesn't do destiny. He does dependency.
Exactly. And that is exactly what we are getting into today. So, welcome to our exploration. We are immersing ourselves once again in the dizzying, brilliant cultural references of Cole Porter.
It's always a wild ride.
It really is. And for those of you keeping track, this is installment 59 in our ongoing Porter-Pedia series, where we are exploring the world, the work, and the incredibly fascinating life of this legendary composer.
And this particular exploration is the third in a sequence we've been doing. Specifically, we're examining the overwhelming catalog of cultural references used in Porter's famous list songs.
Right, because we've already dissected the mechanics behind the song's farming and they couldn't compare to you.
Two incredible pieces of writing.
Oh, absolutely. And I warmly encourage you to check those out after we wrap up today's session. But for right now, we are turning our attention to a slightly deeper cut.
Yeah, this one is special.
It is a track from the 1935 musical Jubilee, and it's called A Picture of Me Without You.
It's just a remarkable piece of work, truly a masterpiece of lyricism. Because, honestly, it functions almost like a philosophical proof disguised as a foxtrot.
It really does. And before we get into the thick of it, I have to make the big plug for you listening right now. If you enjoy peeling back the layers of history, wit, and linguistic gymnastics, you absolutely must buy the book Porter-Pedia.
It is essential reading.
It literally explains every single reference Cole Porter ever dropped, over 2,600 of them.
Which is just a staggering number to think about.
Right, and we have linked it right there in the description for you, so grab a copy.
It functions essentially as the Rosetta Stone for understanding Broadway's most sophisticated and arguably most cynical era.
Exactly, and for today's exploration, we are drawing heavily from a brilliant long-form article that analyzes this song, along with Porter's original lyrics, and a really comprehensive reference appendix. So, okay, let's unpack this.
Do it.
Because on the surface, A Picture of Me Without You is ostensibly just a simple love song.
Right.
A guy telling a girl he needs her.
Right, the standard setup.
But when you strip it down using these sources, it is actually a sly, deeply cynical anatomy of 1930s culture. It exposes how our very identities are constructed, not by our souls, but by our accessories.
Precisely. What makes this song a masterpiece isn't the romance. In fact, I'd say the romance is almost a Trojan horse.
No, I like that.
The genius lies in the structural absurdity that Porter uses to prove his point. He built a mathematical, almost sociopathic argument for love.
Sociopathic is a great word for it, so let's look at how he sets the trap. Because Porter is too smart to just launch right into his grand catalog of famous people, he grounds you first.
Right. He starts small.
Exactly. The introduction of the song is just a dialogue between two characters, the prince and Karen, and the prince is fussing over the most mundane things imaginable.
Just everyday annoyances.
He's complaining he can't find a cigarette. Karen tells him they're over there. Then he can't find his slippers. She points out they're under the chair. He asks the time. She tells him it's just 2.
Notice what Porter is doing here, though. He is starting with domestic realism. But more importantly, he is establishing incompetence.
Total incompetence.
Right. The prince is a grown man, presumably powerful given his title, yet he literally cannot navigate the basic logistics of his own living room without her.
Right. And then the prince delivers this fantastic line. He says, quote, "It's awful, my lamb. I'm getting so damn dependent on you."
It's such a specific word choice.
It's not, "I am burning with passion for you." It's, "I am getting so damn dependent." It's almost an admission of defeat, isn't it?
Oh, entirely. That word dependent, that is the seed from which the entire philosophy of the song grows. Porter introduces this dependency as a mild irritation.
Like an itch.
Exactly. The prince is slightly embarrassed by his own lack of self-sufficiency.
But then he leans into it. The lyrics pivot beautifully here. He says, from being merely a necessary luxury and someone sympathetic to have about, why now you're nearly a luxurious necessity, I couldn't imagine ever living without.
The psychological shift between necessary luxury and luxurious necessity is just profound.
Right, because a luxury is an adornment.
Exactly.
Yeah.
It's an optional accessory that makes life more pleasant. You like having it, but you don't need it.
But a necessity is the structural foundation. He's realizing she isn't just, the heated seats in the car. She is the transmission.
That's a great way to put it.
But let me push back on this for a second just to play devil's advocate. Is this actually romantic? Or is Porter just terrified of genuine vulnerability, so he hides behind this intellectual wordplay? Because admitting you need someone just to find your slippers feels a little, I don't know, codependent.
It is absolutely a defense mechanism.
Yeah.
I mean, Porter's characters rarely allow themselves the indignity of unvarnished emotion.
They're too cool for that.
Way too cool. They intellectualize their feelings to control them.
Yeah.
The prince cannot simply say, I love you, because that requires surrendering power.
Right, and royals don't surrender.
Exactly. Instead, he diagnoses his condition. He tells her she has become structurally necessary to his existence. He's trying to make his love a matter of objective, observable fact rather than messy, subjective emotion.
And once he establishes that she is the transmission, that she's structurally necessary, he has to prove it to her.
Yes.
He says, demonstrate the sheer scale of his dependency.
And he does this by abandoning the living room entirely and blasting off into the stratosphere of 1930s high culture and celebrity, which is just such a wild pivot.
It really is. And this brings us to the core architectural device of the song. The refrain is built entirely on a singular, ingenious formula.
The picture X without Y formula.
Yes. Picture a person or thing without its defining element.
He uses the word picture over and over again. He's demanding the listener engage their imagination to witness an identity collapse. Let's look at the first major hits here. Picture Henry Ford without a car.
Right.
Picture Fritzie Chrysler without a fiddle. And picture H.G. Wells without a brain.
What's fascinating here is how deliberate these pairings are. Let's dissect the mechanics of what Porter is doing. Take Henry Ford.
Okay, let's look at Ford.
By 1935, Ford is not just a wealthy industrialist. He represents the entirety of mass production. He is the actual machinery of 20th century American life.
So when Porter strips the car away from Henry Ford, he isn't just taking away a prop. He is dismantling the man's entire meaning.
Exactly.
It's like, think about it like picturing a smartphone without a screen.
Oh, that's a good analogy.
Right. It's not just broken. It literally ceases to be the thing we understand it to be. Porter is showing us that Henry Ford's identity trades entirely on the fiat currency of the automobile. Without the car, Ford is just some angry guy in Michigan.
Just a guy.
He ceases to be the Titan we understand. So does this mean Porter views romantic love as an existential necessity, or is he just playing a word game here?
Oh, I think he's doing both. That fiat currency metaphor you used is perfect, because Porter is making the argument that identity is never intrinsic. It is entirely relational.
Meaning Ford does not exist independently of the Model T.
Exactly. And he connects this right back to the emotional logic of the song. Each impossible pairing builds the case that life without the beloved is mathematically and logically nonsensical.
And he does the exact same thing with Fritzie Chrysler.
Yes, the Austrian virtuoso.
Whose entire genius was channeled through the violin.
Right. The virtuoso in the 1930s was viewed almost as a physical extension of their instrument. Remove the violin, and Chrysler is stripped of his voice. He becomes completely unintelligible to the public. He might as well not exist.
And then my favorite of this trio, picture H.G. Wells without a brain.
Brutal.
This one is so aggressively funny to me. Wells was the quintessential public intellectual, right? The futurist, the visionary. A brainless H.G. Wells isn't just an incomplete person. It's a hilarious contradiction that renders a genius totally absurd.
It completely reduces a literary giant to a punchline. But notice the progression here. Ford is industry. Chrysler is art. Wells is intellect.
He's covering all the bases.
Porter is systematically working his way through the pillars of human achievement and demonstrating how easily they can be toppled simply by removing one single prop.
It's an aggressive argument. He's stacking these impossible, nonsensical pairings to build a mathematical case for the prince's love.
Yes.
He is basically saying, do you see how ridiculous these concepts are? That is exactly how mathematically and logically nonsensical my life is without you. The absurdity is the emotional argument.
He is equating the prince's romantic dependency with the existential dependency of the world's most famous figures.
Yeah.
Which, if you think about it, is an act of incredible ego disguised as a romantic compliment.
Oh, absolutely. But here's where it gets really interesting.
Yeah.
Because Porter doesn't just stick to the giants of industry and art. He casts this massive, almost violently democratic cultural net.
He really is.
He mixes high culture, low culture, sacred institutions, and everyday commercialism into the exact same blender.
He had a cosmopolitan's wide expertise. That's a key to understanding Porter. He possessed the cultural literacy to draw from incredibly elevated matters and deeply mundane ones with equal enthusiasm.
And he expects his audience to keep up with him.
Oh, completely. He doesn't dumb it down.
So let's look at this juxtaposition. In the same breath, he tells you to picture Tintern Abbey without a cloister, and then picture Billy the Oyster Man without an oyster.
The whiplash there is deliberate, and it's brilliant.
It's insane because Tintern Abbey carries immense literary prestige. It's the ruined Welsh monastery immortalized by William Wordsworth. It represents history, romantic poetry, the sublime aesthetics of ruin.
The height of high culture.
And then immediately, Billy the Oyster Man, a street vendor in New York City, a guy famous for slinging oysters and singing to crowds in Harlem.
Talk about a pivot.
You have the zenith of British romanticism colliding with the sensory grit of a 1930s New York street corner, and Porter treats them with the exact same structural reverence.
That's the democratic part of it. To him, the ruined abbey and the Harlem vendor are equally available to be dismantled for a rhyme.
He is deliberately flattening the cultural hierarchy. In Porter's structural logic, a street vendor's identity is just as fragile and just as dependent on its defining element as a centuries-old monastery.
And he does it again with Central Park without a sailor.
Oh, yes. Taking this grand Olmsted-designed landscape, the literal lung of New York City, and reducing its identity down to the everyday sight of a sailor on shore leave looking for a date.
But the truly transgressive moves happen when Porter takes on moral authority.
Right, when he commercializes it.
Yes. Picture Billy Sunday without a sinner.
Okay, we need to pause on Billy Sunday because this is fascinating. Billy Sunday was arguably the most famous evangelist of his era.
Huge cultural figure.
A former professional baseball player who brought incredible physicality to his preaching, he would run across the stage, slide into home plate to represent beating the devil. He'd smash chairs. It was a massive performance.
It was an absolute spectacle of salvation.
But his entire performance required an audience of the damned. What is a preacher without a sinner?
He's just a guy yelling at an empty tent.
Exactly. His moral authority is completely dependent on the moral failure of others.
And Porter pairs that religious dependency with another massive figure, Father Coughlin. The lyric is, picture Sunday tea minus Father Coughlin.
Which, in 1935, is a massive, politically charged reference. Coughlin was the radio priest reaching tens of millions of listeners. He blended religion with this aggressive, populist political rhetoric.
Now, it's important to note that the sources we're using frame this purely in terms of structural identity. We aren't endorsing or taking sides on Coughlin's or Sunday's ideologies.
Right, absolutely. We're just impartially reporting on how the source material analyzes Porter's use of these figures as cultural touchstones. And look at what Porter surrounds Coughlin and Sunday with. In the very same breath, he invokes everyday commercialism.
The brands.
Yes. Picture poor Mr. Heinz, my dear, without a pickle. Or Mr. Belova without the time. Good cigars without Havana.
It's stunning.
Yeah.
He is equating the spiritual authority of an evangelist with the mechanical precision of a Bulova watch.
And the mass-produced branding of a Heinz pickle. He is saying that in modern America, ideology, religion, and luxury watches are all just consumer products. They're all just brands.
That is the deep cynicism of the song right there. He reduces moral crusaders to the exact same ontological status as a condiment.
Condiment.
If Heinz needs the pickle to be relevant, Billy Sunday needs the sinner. They are both just peddling goods.
And no institution is safe in the song. He looks at elite education and says, picture Mother Yale minus Father Harkness.
Let's break that down.
Yeah.
Mother Yale being the nurturing personification of the university.
And Father Harkness being Edward Harkness, the prominent philanthropist who practically bankrolled the residential college system there.
So you have the nurturing mother without the wealthy father fitting the bill.
It's a very sharp, almost biting observation about how elite education is actually funded. He strips away the ivy-covered prestige and points directly at the checkbook.
Money talks.
Always. He mentions Mr. Lord minus Mr. Taylor, splitting up the upscale NYC department store. And then he does the same thing with the American myth itself. This is honestly my favorite part of the entire song. When Porter takes aim at the foundational stories of the country,
He dissects the mythology with surgical precision. Let's look at George Washington.
picture little George Washington without a cherry.
Now, when Porter strips Washington of the cherry trio, he isn't just taking away a piece of fruit.
No, not at all.
He is dismantling the entire American myth of innate presidential honesty.
Exactly. The cherry tree story is how America teaches its children that their leaders are fundamentally good. I cannot tell a lie. By removing it, Porter is saying the presidency is just a performance. Without the prop, Washington is just a politician.
And he follows it with, picture Paul Revere without a horse.
The great hero of the revolution.
A hero whose entire historical relevance is dependent on his means of transportation. Without the horse, Revere is just a guy running down the street yelling at people in the middle of the night.
The heroism is completely contingent on the animal.
It really is. And it even takes on scripture. Picture Brother Cain without his Abel.
Wow. Think about that one. If you take Abel away from the story of the first murder, what is Cain?
He's just an agricultural worker having a bad day.
Right. There is no tragedy. There is no universal narrative of human sin. The identity of the villain requires the victim.
Which perfectly illustrates Porter's overarching philosophy here. We do not exist in a vacuum. Our identities are inextricably bound to the people and things we interact with, and often the things we destroy.
So we have art, industry, religion, and American myth.
Yeah.
But Porter doesn't stop there. He zeroes in on the very specific, highly topical social and political landscape of 1935.
This is where the song really gets its teeth.
Oh, yeah. It is a satirical dissection of the elite class.
And this is where the historical context of 1935 is vital. We have to remember, this is the heart of the Great Depression. The country is economically devastated.
Breadlines everywhere.
Yes. Yet there is this hyper-visible, immensely wealthy upper class that the public is obsessively tracking through newspapers and newsreels.
Let's look at the politics he includes. The lyric is, picture Huey Long, less Louisiana.
Huey Long the Kingfish. In 1935, he was perhaps the most dangerous and powerful political figure outside of FDR. He had a dictatorial grip on Louisiana, running his Share Our Wealth program.
Again, just referencing the source materials analysis here without taking political sides. But structurally, his power was intrinsically tied to the geography and the specific populist anger of that state.
Absolutely.
To separate Huey Long from Louisiana is to render him completely impotent. It is power detached from its base. And considering Long was assassinated right around the time this musical debuted, the line takes on this really chilling resonance about the fragility of political empires.
And Porter takes a swing at the other end of the political spectrum, too. The bureaucratic bloat. Picture City Hall without boondogglin'.
Boondoggle being the slang term heavily used to criticize wasteful, inefficient government projects during the Depression. Porter is saying, what is municipal government without wasteful inefficiency?
It literally wouldn't be City Hall.
The corruption is the institution.
But where Porter's pen is sharpest is when he turns his gaze to his own peers, the socialites, the ultra-wealthy.
Picture Barbara Hutton without a nickel.
Okay, Barbara Hutton was the heiress to the Woolworth fortune. During the worst years of the Depression, she threw a lavish, astronomically expensive 21st birthday party that triggered massive public backlash.
I mean, people were starving.
Exactly. The press dubbed her the poor little rich girl because despite her millions, her personal life was a chaotic string of failed marriages to European aristocrats.
So picturing her without a nickel is pure devastating irony. Her entire public existence, her appeal to those titled husbands, her status in the press, it was all entirely constructed by the Woolworth fortune.
Take away the nickel and the armor is gone.
And the curse is gone. She ceases to be Barbara Hutton.
He does this with old money as well. Picture poor Philadelphia without a Biddle.
The Biddle family. They were the aristocratic identity of Philadelphia, deeply entrenched in diplomacy, the arts, and law. A city without its defining elite is just buildings.
And he mentions Harold Vanderbilt, too. Picture Harold Vanderbilt without a boat.
Vanderbilt was a railroad executive, but in the public imagination, he was defined by elite leisure. He was a champion yacht racer.
Elite identity reduced entirely to a pastime. But the one that fascinates me the most is, picture Dear Mrs. Corrigan without a dinner.
Laura May Corrigan, a truly phenomenal figure who reveals a lot about how Porter viewed social currency.
She really does. She was born into a relatively humble background in Wisconsin, but married into steel wealth.
And in 1930s high society, she was known primarily as a hostess. She famously threw incredibly lavish parties for European royalty. Now, later in life, during World War II, she actually funded and ran a massive underground operation to help Allied soldiers escape occupied France.
Earning high military honors, she was a genuine hero.
But in 1935, to Cole Porter and the readers of the Society pages, she was just a dinner party. Social ritual was her defining public feature.
Without a dinner. He strips away the event, the catered food, the royal guests, and she simply disappears from the social register. It's brutal.
Which leads me to ask you about the tone again. Porter was moving in these exact same circles. He was sailing on these yachts. He was attending these dinners. So is this affectionate ribbing of his friends, or is he actually diagnosing the absolute emptiness of their lives?
Porter was known as the arch cynic, and he walked a razor-thin tightrope. Sincerity in his world was always tempered by wit, and wit by a faint awareness of its own artifice.
So it's both.
There is an insider's familiarity here, certainly, but there is absolutely a sting. He is reducing the complex, messy human lives of his peers down to a single prop. He's exposing how shallow public identity truly is in high society.
He's saying, without your boat, Harold Vanderbilt, you are literally nobody. That is incredibly cynical.
It is. It is the elegant game of the arch cynic, transforming the concept of romantic love into a weaponized dissection of social artifice.
And he saved some of his sharpest weapons for Hollywood. Picture love in Hollywood without divorce.
That is a pointed sociological observation right there. Hollywood was the global factory for romantic ideals on screen, but off screen, it was famous for the fleeting, transactional nature of its marriages.
Porter is saying divorce isn't a failure of Hollywood love. It is the defining feature of it. You literally cannot picture the industry without the scandal of the split. It's baked into the business model.
And then he drills down into incredibly specific, highly curated Hollywood gossip.
Yeah.
Picture Clifton Webb minus Mother Mabel.
Okay, we have to talk about Clifton and Mabel Webb because this reference is doing so much heavy lifting regarding the performance of identity.
Clifton Webb was an elegant, sharp-tongued actor and dancer. But in social circles, he was famous for his intensely close, inextricably linked relationship with his mother, Mabel.
She was a fiercely protective, socially ambitious woman who acted as his absolute shield. They lived together until she died when he was well into his 70s.
And during the lavender marriage era of Hollywood, where actors were forced into highly publicized fake marriages to hide their sexuality, Webb and his mother functioned as a unit.
She was his social architect and his cover, allowing him to navigate the homophobic landscape of the era as a devoted bachelor.
So when Porter says, picture Clifton Webb minus Mother Mabel, he is tapping directly into the survival mechanics of 1930s celebrity. He is acknowledging that Webb's public identity is entirely dependent on his mother's presence.
Remove her, and the whole curated performance of his life threatens to collapse.
It's a wink to the audience that knows how the game is played, which transitions perfectly into the overarching theme of this entire song and the musical it belongs to.
Identity as performance.
Yes. If we connect this to the bigger picture, to truly understand the weight of A Picture of Me Without You, we have to look at the vessel it was carried in, the musical Jubilee.
Jubilee is fundamentally a satire about the tension between the role you play and who you actually are. The premise revolves around a fictional European royal family.
Right.
They are facing a looming revolution, but honestly, they are just bored out of their minds by the rigid traditional constraints of the monarchy.
So they take advantage of the political unrest to abandon the throne and essentially run off to behave like modern, image-obsessed celebrities.
The king wants to do parlor tricks with a writer who is a thinly veiled caricature of Noel Coward. The queen wants to swim with an actor modeled after Johnny Weissmuller, the Olympic swimmer who played Tarzan.
They are abandoning the gold standard of royalty for the fiat currency of celebrity.
Exactly. The entire show is a grand commentary on how identity is constructed, contingent, and often a ridiculous costume.
There is a deleted verse from the original score of this song that perfectly captures this theme. It features a character named Mowgli talking to a character named Butch.
I love this deleted verse.
The lyrics go, "It's mighty mean of you, Butch, to leave me all alone and say goodbye to swimming school. You'll never be happy, Butch, just sitting on a throne when you could be splashing your little Mowgli in a pool. And as far as I go, I know it's true that I'm going to be awful lost without you."
It brilliantly undercuts the majesty of the monarchy, just sitting on a throne. Porter reduces the seat of absolute power to a boring piece of furniture that keeps a guy from going swimming.
The role of a monarch is just a prop.
If we connect this to the broader cultural context, 1935 is a fascinating, deeply contradictory year.
It is the defining clash of the era. I mean, the Great Depression is an inescapable reality. Massive unemployment, breadlines, economic terror.
It was grim.
And yet, popular entertainment, Broadway, Hollywood, the radio networks, is thriving by providing unprecedented levels of glamour, wit, and escapism.
You see that exact clash mirrored in the lyrics. Porter puts the grim reality of boondogglin right next to Barbara Hutton's millions. He refuses to let the audience completely escape.
What the proliferation of mass media did in the 1930s was create, for the first time, a truly national, shared cultural vocabulary.
An audience member in a theater in New York and a family listening to the radio in the Midwest could both instantly recognize the names of Huey Long, Father Coughlin, Henry Ford, and H.G. Wells.
These weren't just people, they were avatars. They embodied entire industries, political movements, or philosophical ideas.
And Porter expects his audience to have the cultural literacy to juggle all of them simultaneously. He'll throw out a reference like Hamlet's ghost without a darkness.
High cultural literacy right there. The ghost in Shakespeare's Hamlet, whose appearance sets the tragedy in motion. The darkness refers to the ambiguity of the ghost. Is it a righteous spirit of a murdered king, or a malevolent demon trying to damn Hamlet's soul?
The identity of the ghost requires that moral darkness. And he puts that Shakespearean analysis right next to the Staten Island ferry. Picture Staten Island without a ferry. The vital, everyday commuter link to Manhattan. He expects you to understand Shakespearean tragedy and the logistics of New York public transit.
Because that was the reality of Cole Porter's own life.
Yeah.
He embodied this cosmopolitan mix. He was a man who moved effortlessly between the elite salons of Paris, the palazzos of Venice, and the gritty rehearsal rooms of Broadway.
He was firmly entrenched in the international elite. He was attending the parties thrown by Elsa Maxwell. He probably dined with Laura May Corrigan and drank with the Vanderbilts.
He was an insider, yes. But because of his role as an entertainer and because of his sexuality, he also retained the critical distance of an outsider. He inhabited high society, but he possessed the sharp, unforgiving eye required to see its absolute absurdities.
He sees right through it.
He gathers all these titans, Ford, Chrysler, Hutton, long into his lyric, not to celebrate their greatness, but to rearrange them.
He plays with them like toys in a sandbox. He snaps off the pieces that make them special just to see what happens.
He dismantles them to expose the fragility of the identities they represent. He is proving that no one, no matter how rich or powerful, is self-sufficient.
Okay, we have covered an immense amount of ground here. We've moved from a pair of missing slippers to the collapse of the American automotive industry, the deconstruction of George Washington, and the existential dread of high society. So what does this all mean for us? What is the final takeaway from this 1935 time capsule?
The takeaway is that Cole Porter is a master of philosophical deception. Because what begins as a playful romantic game, a man admitting he needs a woman to tell him what time it is, actually reveals a deeply unsettling truth about the human condition.
That identity is entirely relational.
We do not exist independently. By systematically stripping away these defining elements, the car from Ford, the fiddle from Chrysler, the pickle from Heinz, the cloister from Tintern Abbey Porter, exposes the terrifying fragility of meaning itself.
It's all just props.
If you are only defined by what you produce, what you own, or who you associate with, then you are always one lost prop away from vanishing entirely.
It is profound. And I think this is exactly why these list songs remain so vital and why they are so much more than just catchy, clever tunes. They aren't just preserving the names and fashions of 1935. They are preserving the very structures by which a society understands itself.
And we replicate those exact same structures today. We haven't changed at all.
Not even a little bit. We tie our identities inextricably to our jobs. Think about it. The very first question you ask someone at a party is, what do you do?
Always.
We define ourselves by our social circles, the aesthetic of our Instagram feeds, the specific brands we choose to wear or boycott.
We're constantly constructing our own list songs every single day. We perform our identities based on a curated set of props and associations.
And Porter is asking the terrifying question, if those props are taken away, who are we? If you lose the job, if the social circle moves on, if the brand goes bankrupt, do you still exist?
Which raises an important question, and it is something I want you, the listener, to really chew on long after this exploration concludes. If our identities, much like Henry Ford's and Barbara Hutton's, are completely dependent on these external things or people, What happens to us when the cultural landscape inevitably shifts and those references fade away? Are we, like the more obscure names in Porter's song, only as real as the current audience's memory of us?
Wow. If nobody remembers Billy the Oyster Man, does his identity simply evaporate from history? That is a genuinely haunting thought to pull from a bouncy show tune that started with a guy complaining he couldn't find his cigarettes.
That is the enduring genius of Cole Porter. He can take you from the mundane comforts of a living room to a full-blown existential crisis in under 3 minutes and make you tap your foot the entire time.
Well, I think that is a beautifully provocative place to leave it. A massive thank you to you, the listener, for joining us on this deep dive into the architecture of 1935 high society. It has been an absolute joy unpacking this masterpiece with you.
It really has.
And remember, if you want to explore the other 2,500 plus references we didn't get to today, do yourself a favor and check out the book Porter-Pedia, linked right there in the description. It is a phenomenal resource.
Until next time, keep a very close eye on the props in your own life, and maybe learn to find your own slippers.
And remember, swimming in the messy, complicated, dependent waters of real life is always more interesting than sitting alone on a pristine throne. We'll see you next time.